to the pending U.S. attack against Iran. By now, everyone from Texas to Tehran knows that the U.S. has been pulling air power and forces from South Korea to Missouri to the Mediterranean, concentrating them in the Indian Ocean Island Air Base at Diego Garcia.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the Books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Hello, I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and human rights author of 235 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide, including IBM and the Holocaust, War Against the Weak, and the Farhud, as well as other books. This is a show for opinion makers and decision makers, not mass clicks. So if you think our show's content is meaningful, spread the word throughout your most informed networks. Subscribe for free alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, we need your assistance. Please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. Go now to theedwinblackshow.com/support and keep us independent. Today's episode is made possible and sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by the new audio edition of my book, Nazi Nexus, now available on Amazon, and by the good people at Covenant Wines. If you would like to honor someone with a sponsorship, contact us. That said, remember, I only speak for myself and for history. The same goes for all of my guests. Today, we welcome viewers from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the Villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, and Tampa Bay. Harvey, I know you're coming late. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from most of our usuals: Australia, Sydney, that's New Zealand, Germany, Holland, Sweden, France, Italy, Spain again, Poland, of course, will be there in a few weeks, Great Britain, Canada, Argentina, Mexico, and Israel, plus other countries. If you have a question, place one short sentence in Zoom's QA feature. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, is global and fast growing, enjoying many scores of thousands of views. We speak frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present very, very tense, and a turbulent future still uncertain. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. Now to my reports. First, to the pending U.S. attack against Iran. By now, everyone from Texas to Tehran knows that the U.S. has been pulling air power and forces from South Korea to Missouri to the Mediterranean, concentrating them in the Indian Ocean Island Air Base at Diego Garcia. These include at least 9 B-2 bombers. That is about half our B-2 fleet. Each B-2 can carry 2 GBU 57AB massive ordnance penetrators, the MOP, that due to the speed at launch and its 30,000-pound weight can penetrate down 200 feet of concrete, protecting a fuse within that only after this deep penetration will trigger a massive 5,300-pound explosion. The Air Force possesses more than 24 copies of these monster bombs, but we have a suite of other bunker busters as well. These include the BLU-109 with 2,000-pound warheads. BLU, by the way, stands for Bomb Live Unit. Plus, Israel has 2 other items and capabilities which I cannot detail, but which I know about. The bunker busters go straight down. The U.S. also possesses the GBU-43 Moab massive ordnance air blast aka the mother of all bombs. GBU stands for Guided Bomb Unit, and this ordnance delivers 11,000 pounds of horizontal blast that destroys everything for at least a mile and probably more, and the blast radius travels up canyons and ravines to vaporize anything on the ground in the ragged mountain areas where Iran has secreted its nuclear facilities, such as the Natanz complex, buried a stunning 100 to 300 feet below the Zagros Mountains. Both the U.S. and Israel also possess something extraordinary with a mythical name that would stun the world if deployed. I cannot mention it now, but I'm pretty sure they're getting ready to use it. The B-2s are bolstered by squadrons of C-17 and C-5 resupply planes brought in from across the world, as well as KC-135, and perhaps famous KC-46A Pegasus refuelers. Some may ask, why station the B-2s in Diego Garcia? Because at a distance of 3,200 miles from Tehran, Diego Garcia is beyond the reach of Iranian missiles. If and when the B-2s deploy, they will refuel either midway or closer, creating a non-stop attack pattern. Each B-2 will be accompanied by a group of EA-18G Growlers to disrupt any electronic warfare measures by Iran or its proxies in Yemen, and by F-22 and F-35 fighters, plus the F-18 Super Hornets to destroy any threats along the way and to pulverize any counterattacks by Iran that are certain to emerge. If the B-2s were stationed any closer, say at the American bases in Qatar or Djibouti, they would be vulnerable to Iranian attacks while on the ground. Once airborne, the B-2s and their packages are immune and invulnerable. That said, there is a mysterious airstrip being built by the UAE on the tiny island of Mayan, just a few miles off the Yemeni coast. No one knows who will utilize or control that air base, which is basically a short stone's throw from the Houthi coast. Now, will the attack on Iran take place? Trump is demanding, quote, complete dismantlement of the nuclear program. Complete dismantlement, which is a quote, means that all the HEU, or highly enriched uranium, anything over 3 point something, will have to be removed. Iran now has enormous stockpiles of 60% HEU, which could be enriched to weapons grade that's 90% within 7 days, if it has not already been enriched. Cut to the chase. Iran now has 6 unassembled bombs, weapons, nuclear devices, and a chorus of experts asserts they could assemble deliverable nukes within a week. While Iran has agreed to indirect talks through Oman, these almost certainly will fail, and if so, the certainty is high that Trump, along with Israel, will destroy the entire nuclear enterprise. We don't know it, but we suspect it has a high probability, plus the promised day after counterattack capability by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards will also need to be destroyed. These bombings, these attacks, will take at least 1 to 3 weeks before the dust clears. Iranian dissidents, in such a case, will rise up, the mullahs will be replaced, and if so, the world will change. Trump is a peacemaker, an intrepid war-making peacemaker. But right now, only he can order an attack, and we can just wait and hope this scourge of humanity will be removed. To help us understand more, we have Iran expert Clare Lopez. Tell us more, Clare.
Well, thanks, Edwin, and appreciate being with you and the group today. As you note, tensions are ratcheting upwards across the Middle East, and it is not just because the Trump administration has unleashed a barrage of military attacks against the Ansar Allah or Houthis in Yemen. It is also, as you note, because of recent reporting, and reporting going back some time, actually, by the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, and David Albright's what's called the Good ISIS, that is the Institute for the Study for Science and International Security, and importantly, reporting from the Iranian opposition group, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, which in recent briefings, December 2024, and again then in January this year, 2025, took note of the fact that the Iranian regime is now accelerating its work, its efforts to attach its nuclear warheads, yes, they have warheads, attach them to the nose cones of their ballistic missiles. So all the more startling, to me certainly, maybe to you as well, startling that in late March, a few weeks ago, before the Senate Intelligence Committee, our Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, stated in her opening remarks that, quote, the IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003. Unbelievable. In particular, unbelievable because, as you were outlining there, Edwin, the United States is in the middle of a massive buildup of, in particular, air forces on the island of Diego Garcia, as you mentioned, including B-1, B-2 bombers that carry those great big MOPs, as they call them, massive ordnance penetrators, bombs, and also the refueling tankers, and as you also said, many U.S. fighter jets staging to Diego Garcia and at other bases around the Middle East. I'll just mention one last thing because I know our time is short, and I want to mention, I refer to commentary that was just published today by our good friend, former ambassador from Israel to the United States, Yoram Ettinger, who talks about exactly what you made note of there, Edwin. This is the final point, that the diplomatic negotiation option that President Trump seems to be at least offering to the Iranian regime, although it's rejected it, but that option is only effective, as Yoram Ettinger says, when it's conducted between parties who consider negotiation a step towards peaceful coexistence, which of course the regime in Tehran does not. And then finally, as you also alluded to, should this attack take off and target the Iranian nuclear weapons program, then it is the opportunity for the long-suffering Iranian people, the population itself, which more than 50% living under the poverty line. That's not the U.S. poverty line with 52-inch screen TVs on their walls. No, this is they cannot afford to buy food. This is the Iranian rial, trades right now at more than $1 million. Yeah, I said $1 million to $1. But that is their chance, would be their chance, he says, to rise up and effect regime change for themselves, to usher in a truly representative, democratically based republic in Iran without nuclear weapons and with an end to all support for international Islamic terrorism that the regime supports. So that's where we're at the moment. We'll have to see what happens.
Claire, you gave an excellent report. I'll tell you, the IC, the intelligence community, has been issuing, I won't say fallacious, but misleading assessments about the Iranian nuclear operation for many, many years. You and I both know that. Tulsi Gabbard, I think, was referring, and I'm just guessing here, to the fact that the Ayatollah has not given the final load the weapon instruction, and he's waiting for that. But would you agree that Iran now has 5 or 6 unassembled nuclear bombs in its possession?
Well, here's the thing. I don't know the exact number. I would estimate fewer than 10 or a dozen, somewhere 6, 7 in that range, perhaps. We don't know the number. But when we say unassembled, the warheads themselves are assembled. They're not unassembled. They're assembled. But according to sort of international I don't know, conversational vocabulary. It's not called a weapon until those warheads are actually attached to the nose cones of the delivery system, the missiles. And yes, I do think that Director Gabbard probably was referring herself to the March 2025, that's just a few weeks ago, intelligence community annual threat assessment, which really gave short shrift to the Iranian threat, saying, quote, Tehran will try to leverage its robust military capability, expanded nuclear program, et cetera, to bolster its regional influence and ensure regime survival. Not a peep about its nuclear weapons program.
Hey, Claire, who's building this secret base a couple of miles off the Yemeni coast?
It seems to be the United Arab Emirates. That's the reporting I've heard. The runway being built there is very long, I think more than a mile in Western measurements, which would be able to handle some of these heavy B-2, B-1 bombers. But I believe it's the Emirates.
Well, the Emirates is the construction company. They're famous for that, and they're going to be building the one for Israel in Somaliland that I talked about some months ago. But who do you think is going to utilize this? What are they going to use it for? Is this going to be a staging area for an anti-missile complex, or do you have any idea at all?
You know, we really don't know. But the fact that it is located so close off the, in the waters off of Yemen seems a bit odd in that, the Houthis, supplied, armed, trained, funded by the Iranian regime in Tehran, they have the ballistic missiles, rockets, drones that would be able easily to reach that newly constructed runway airbase. So I'm not really sure what that's about.
Let me have it in a word. In your opinion, are we bombing Iran or are we not?
I think it will come to that. Yes, I do. I know that's more than one word. I think that the Trump administration is playing out this back and forth with the Tehran regime right now. Negotiations, direct, indirect, using Oman as a go-between. When that is played out, and it will, because the regime will not accept the terms of verifiably dismantling its nuclear weapons program, then we may see a go sign.
I agree. Thank you, Claire. Now to topic 2, our out of control local district judges. America has 94 federal districts, which are served by more than 677 local federal judges, some of whom are astute practitioners and some of whom are just a bunch of local members of the legal community until appointed by the president in total conjunction with the local U.S. senator, whoever that is. They are out of control and pushing this country to a constitutional crisis. Now, we aren't there yet because these judges are not being properly defined yet, but we are close. Judicial overreach today is real. Democratic left-wing judges are now commandeering the government, overruling the will of the electorate and the constitutional authority of the president and the Congress, which has approved presidential appointees in a rigorous process. Just as the president cannot compel a federal court to convene, hear a case, and rule, a local federal court has zero authority to tell the Secretary of Defense who to accept as a war fighter and cannot stop the president from exercising his sole authority to oversee and manage the funds that Congress appropriates. This includes bogus and wasteful spending. Remember, Congress appropriates funds, yes, but only the president can spend the funds and oversee those funds. The weaponization of the judicial system extended beyond out-of-control local prosecutors, such as we saw in Fulton County and Manhattan. For heaven's sakes, the Democrats arranged for an acting traffic court judge in Chicago to strike Trump's name from Illinois' last election ballot, thus impacting the national election until she was smacked down in a 9-0 SCOTUS ruling. It's hard to believe. Can a local judge decide if and when Trump should strike the Houthis or Iran? can a local judge compel the president to pay a fraudulent or suspicious contract? This uproar has caused members of Congress to take swift action. We think some 15 federal judges have been impeached during the history of this nation, which only requires a majority vote in the House Judiciary Committee ratified by a simple majority in the House. But only 8 or 9 have actually been removed after a trial in the Senate. 3 resigned after impeachment to avoid that trial. That said, the powerful, sagacious chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee has made it clear, quote, you cannot impeach a judge because you don't like his ruling, close quote. But the decision is not Grassley's to make at the Senate Judiciary Committee. Impeachment begins in the House, and the House Judiciary Chairman is Trump loyalist Jim Jordan. Judges who have either seen articles of impeachment filed or threatened include District Judge James Boasberg at the top, the DC-based judge who improperly ordered the administration to halt flights deporting alleged Venezuelan gang members under the Alien Enemies Act of 1789, plus Paul Engelmeyer, who improperly limited DOJ's access to sensitive Treasury data, John Bates, who improperly ordered the administration to restore health agency web pages and data sets that went dark, Amir Hatem Mahdi Ali, who ordered the administration to temporarily reinstate foreign aid funding, and John McConnell Jr. Contrary to popular wisdom, federal judges are not appointed for life. The Constitution's Article 3 vesting clause states, quote, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may time to time ordain and establish. Yes, it says that, but it adds this. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior. Close quote. Various congressmen on the record believe a simple majority resolution in both congressional houses stating that the judges are not exercising good behavior by trying to encroach upon the duties and prerogatives of the executive, that is the president, can achieve removal without impeachment and without trial. This is a real live black ink constitutional check and balance. It is also clear that the authority of a local federal judge to rule for jurisdictions way beyond his jurisdiction and across the nation is set forth nowhere in law, nowhere in constitutional suggestion, or anywhere in jurisprudence. It is just overreach, part of the weaponization of the judicial system Trump was elected to dismantle. Even liberal Judge Elena Kagan in 2022 stated, quote, it just can't be right that one district judge can stop a nationwide policy in its tracks and leave it stopped for the years that it takes to go through the normal process. That's a quote, close quote. So what is happening? The Senate now has opened hearings on this issue. Legislation is being prepared now, outlining jurisdictional limits, mandatory appellate procedures, and timelines, and the whole idea of justiciability. Listen to this term, known to all judges, but not so much to the public, judiciable. That is what issues are not permitted to be decided in a court of law, such as war or congressional spending. Chairman Grassley in the Senate says it is the job of judges to interpret the law, not make the law. They are not permitted to govern. They have been elected by no one and answer to no one. Write this down, folks. We must have the rule of law, but not the rule of lawyers. One final note on the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. First, the fact that this is a war power from 1798 does not invalidate it. The Constitution is from 1789. No one thought twice when Biden suggested the Logan Act of 1799 to prosecute Michael Flynn and Donald Trump in the first weeks of his presidency. A closer look at the Alien Enemies Act. Quote, Whenever there is declared war between the United States and any foreign nation or government, or, and get this or, any invasion or predatory incursion is perpetrated, attempted, or threatened against the territory of the United States by any foreign nation or government, and the President makes public proclamation of the event, all natives, citizens, denizens are subject of the hostile nation or government, close quote, ... shall be removed. The words predatory invasion include the sudden influx of the Tren de Aragua gang, unknown until in this country until the Biden years. And this group is a known operative of the outlaw Maduro regime in Venezuela. This is a non-judiciable presidential war power. There is very limited due process because it is a war power, just as we do not have an advanced trial for Houthi or ISIS terrorists to determine if we can take action. Remember, this is not the first bandito or bandit incursion that resulted in war. I remind everyone that Pancho Villa was a German spy. His gang invaded across the Rio Grande in 1915, prompting Wilson to send a vast military expedition headed by Pershing to capture him. We were unsuccessful, leading Germany to issue the Zimmermann Telegram, which asked Mexico to join World War I against the United States. And from that telegram, we entered World War I, and that's a conflict that continues to this day. Richard, give me your thoughts.
What I would like to comment on is the litigation that has been ongoing, and to provide an update as to what's been ongoing on behalf of American victims of terror. For more than 20 years, cases have been brought from before the Second Intifada, as a result of the Second Intifada, since the Second Intifada, and also as a result of 9/11 and various other attacks around the world. As it relates to cases around the world, you should know that federal judges have granted judgments, on behalf of the Marines who were killed or injured in Beirut, people who were killed or injured at the embassy bombings in Beirut and elsewhere, as well as in hotel bombings in Amman and in Kabul. Our firm is involved in many of those cases. Today, we don't have the time to go into them. As it relates to pre-October 7th, cases had been filed, and some of which remain pending, against Iran and Syria under the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, but also against entities under the Anti-Terrorism Act and additional statutes adopted following that act. Those cases include a case we've discussed here before, and that's the Arab Bank case, but also others. If we look at just before October 7th, we'll see that there were cases pending in the International Criminal Court, cases pending against Israel in the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice issued an advisory opinion back in 2004, but then in 2022, a new case was brought forth. Now and those cases are all continuing, in addition to the slamming of Israel at the United Nations. Now let's take a look at pre-October 7th and October 7th and since, and I'll do it fast. As a result of October 7th, many cases that have been filed by law firms around the country are proceeding apace in all of those cases, not just in DC and New York, but also elsewhere with creative lawyers who've brought cases. Cases are proceeding as a result of October 7th against the universities who have allowed all this anti-Semitic, not just rhetoric, but rampant violent threats, assaults, and conduct that the courts are beginning to get their arms around. The Trump administration has issued orders that says we're going to address these issues, and indeed they are. But prior to the Trump administration coming into office, interestingly, the Biden administration issued indictments against Hania, Sinwar, and others as a result of October 7th. Was it a deterrent? Well, we'll never know about them because they're gone. But Indictments are something the U.S. Department of Justice can and should be bringing against perpetrators of hate and perpetrators of terror. I'll comment on one that's an old one. In the Second Intifada, a young woman by the name of Malki Roth, Oliver Shalom, was killed in the Sbarro pizza bombing. The woman, Al-Tamimi, who was responsible for that, was arrested. She was imprisoned. She was released in the Gilad Shalit deal. She went to Jordan. She's still in Jordan. She has a radio show. She has freedom. She's a celebrity. In 2013, the U.S. Department of Justice indicted her. They kept that sealed until 2017. Even after it was unsealed, Jordan has not extradited Al-Tamimi to the United States to stand trial. It's a crime that they have not done so, and the U.S. foreign policy has to force them to do so. She's running free even today, and it's just simply wrong, and it's not justice. And so having this indictment from against Al-Tamimi is good precedent. It's not the first case where we've indicted foreign terrorists for acts of international terror committed abroad. We've indicted, of course, people for acts of terror committed here in the United States, both by domestic criminals, but also foreign terrorists, such as relating to 9/11 and other attacks. Now let me close up by concentrating on October 7th, because there's two prongs to talk about. One is the ongoing litigation against Iran, Syria, North Korea. Our law firm has brought those cases, as have some others. Cases have been brought against Binance, the crypto firm. Cases have been brought against Al Jazeera. Cases, again, have been brought for non-Americans in New York against UNRWA. We're going to be filing a case relating to UNRWA on behalf of Americans. That's already been drafted. There are various other charities that are on target to be sued in the very near future on behalf of victims of October 7th, but also just prior to October 7th. The statute of limitations in the United States is 10 years to sue a foreign state sponsor of terror. That means Iran, Syria, North Korea, and Cuba. They can all be sued, and they are being sued. Cuba is a different category we can't talk about today. Those cases can go back 10 years. Under the Anti-Terrorism Act, they can also go back 10 years. And multiple cases have been brought. I have not mentioned any of them. I will, however, close by talking about some of the good work that U.S. district judges have been doing on cases, some of which are older than October 7th. And I'll just mention actually three that our firm recently received within the past year. First one I'll mention is on behalf of the family of Ari Fuld. A federal judge awarded a $191 million verdict against Iran and Syria. We're already working on collecting that. And American victims of state-sponsored terror are entitled to go into the Victims Fund. The Victims Fund is in the process of paying out now and will have $1 billion to victims and their attorneys. Attorneys' fees are capped. And it was just announced there'll be another payout next year, and that they already have $2 billion in that fund. Two last cases I just want to mention. One is on behalf of a young man, Mr. Wang, who was a Princeton student. We sued for him the Islamic Republic of Iran. While getting his doctorate at Princeton, he was studying in Iran. He was arrested, served 40 months away from his young son and his wife. A federal judge recently awarded $183 million verdict to the family, both compensatory and punitive damages. And lastly, this week, we got a very interesting judgment, Edwin, where we sued the Taliban. And a federal judge ruled that we had effectuated service over the Taliban. They committed attack in Afghanistan. And we received just this week a judgment of $86 million and additional change, $522,627. But two last interesting pieces. One, the case was filed under the Anti-Terrorism Act. So instead of getting punitive damages, you get treble damages. That takes the judgment of this week to $259,567,881 and the judge issued an order that by the end of the month, we should submit our bill for attorney's fees. So anybody that wants to criticize the courts, you go criticize the courts. For me, on behalf of our victims, we work with the courts within the applicable law, but we're also working with Congress to change the law because many cases have not followed, in our view, the intent of Congress. This week, one other thing occurred, an argument in the Supreme Court as to whether or not the PA and the PLO can be sued under U.S. law for their sponsorship of terror. We will all hold our breath to see what the court rules. And to wrap it all up, we just have to take a look at one thing. It's called justice and accountability. It's called these victims who aren't here for the money. They're here for justice. They're here to provide a deterrence. And they're here to stand against terror. And we lawyers are the ones who have the responsibility to advance them for that. There's a lot going on, a lot more coming. I've only touched bits and pieces. I hope it's helpful. Thank you for having me today, Edwin.
Wow, that was a stunning resume of legal actions. And it just shows a couple of things. One, that you are one of the practitioners at the pinnacle of effort to create justice in this world. And I use the word world because you are an exemplar of international justice. Second, you have really, in a stunning fashion, shown, while there are some people objecting to a ruling here and a ruling there, maybe a half a dozen rulings, maybe a dozen rulings. The point is, there are many, many federal judges who are delivering on the promise and the demands of justice. You're doing a wonderful job. I just made a couple of notes. So you picked up a judgment against the Taliban? Is that what you're telling me?
We did indeed. We did indeed. We're very pleased. We got them served. Now we're going to go after their funds everywhere we can find them. And we don't do this alone. We work with some other very top and experienced and dedicated law firms, both here in Israel and literally around the world. When you get a judgment, you think about the fact that now what you have is a judgment like anybody else that gets a judgment in federal court against anybody. Now you have to collect. It's not just taking the victims who qualify under the Victims Fund and put them administratively into the Victims Fund and process and perfect their claims and get an award letter and then process so they can get their distributions. But when it's not against the state sponsor, or it is against the state sponsor that has assets, we lawyers have to find those assets like any other judgment collection. Here in the United States, monies have been attached. We don't have time to go into it, but billions of dollars have been attached by creative lawyers who initiated the process, and some of the rest of us then joined them. We have initiatives going on now around the world that I can't talk about for obvious reasons. In some countries, if you file with a marshal or a sheriff or a bailiff to go serve an attachment, you have to give notice to the other side, and you know those monies will disappear. So we're finding jurisdictions where we can effectuate our judgments, domesticate the U.S. judgments in those countries is a big task. It's going to take many, many, many more years, but justice isn't about time. Justice is about accountability. Thank you, Edwin.
And yes, I should say that it's a huge chore to triple certify a judgment in the United States and export it and then try to have it entered and implemented against one of these bad guys. I know that we're pushing against the clock, but I did want to talk about two other things. You mentioned Tamimi, that Tamimi has not been extradited from Jordan. But I want to add this footnote that you know well. She is one of the worst, of the most unrepentant terrorists. We had her father on this show. We had attorneys on this show. This is the woman who regretted that she didn't kill more children when she bombed the Subaru pizzeria. So kudos for that. Now, before I let you go, I think that some major lawsuits, civil suits, were just filed by the October 7th families against some of these Columbia University advocates for Hamas, including Khalil. Do you know anything about those? Because I found they had stunning information that implied that these guys had knowledge beforehand that these terrorist events were going to take place, and they actually pre-announced them just moments before they occurred. Briefly, what do you know about those?
Yes, the law, we didn't file that case, but we work with the law firm that did. I won't take the time to go into that. The case was filed in the Southern District of New York just last month. Defendants are Hamas's propaganda arm in New York City and on the Columbia University campus. We know this because they advertise themselves as being that. Their self-described acts in furtherance of their goals to assist Hamas have included terrorizing and assaulting Jewish students, unlawfully taking over and damaging public and university property on Columbia's campus, and physically assaulting Columbia University employees. They act behind veiled scarves and largely seek to be anonymous individually, yet seek to intimidate as a group. This case will pull down those scarves and unveil acts that violate this country's anti-terrorism acts. This case will finally hold those admitted terrorists accountable for their actions. It's time, in our view and in the view, and I'll quote Mark Goldfeder, who heads the organization that filed this case, it's time, paraphrase, it's time for American campuses to return to being centers for learning and to be saved from the relentless occupation by Hamas's tragically misguided cohorts. I'll conclude with this. Everybody wants to close their eyes that Hamas and Hezbollah are designated foreign terror organizations. No American should contribute directly or indirectly. No American should provide support verbally, physically, or with applause. They are terrorists. This isn't resistance thereafter. They want to kill Israel. They want to kill Jews. They want to kill Americans. And don't forget it. Do not support Hamas or Hezbollah. They are terror organizations. They need to be not just shut down, but taken down. And thank God that the president, the prime minister, and everybody else is focused on making that happen. Kol hakavod, toda rabah.
All right, and I agree with you, and you have said it well. Thank you very much, Richard. Please stick around if you will. If you have to go, go. But we're going into the vintage boys now. And so here I say, enough contention. I want us to focus on libation, the finest of the fine for Passover. And who do we have with us? The vintage boys. Okay, so now my first bottle is going to be, this is a just released mezcal that I picked up in Mexico. It's called Siempes Espadin, and that means the centipede. I want to tell you about this bottle. First of all, the category is Joven, which means young, so it's not añejo. The type of agave is, of course, Espadin. The master mezcalero is Emir Martinez, who's established an extraordinary reputation throughout Oaxaca. The agave has been matured for 9 years. That's the agave. The plant has been matured, not the mezcal. The roasting method is volcanic stone oven with oak wood. So they put oak wood in a volcanic stone oven. And so all of the wood and the earth comes into everything involving the development of the mezcal. The grinding method of the agave is a stone wheel pulled by horse. Now, this is important because these bottles of mezcal are done by 1- and 2-man family operations. And to resist the mechanization and the industrialization keeps it pure, keeps it to the ground, and makes it so important for us to remember as we sip it. The distillation was a double distillation. Josh should be interested in that. And copper stills were used. Alcohol is 40%. And the origin is actually the San Pablo Villa de Mitla, Oaxaca, Mexico. And it's a certified bottle. I'm going to take my, oh my God. Ooh. So on the nose, this is a deep, invigorating mezcal. Even though it's not añejo, which is aged, which means more than 3 years, it has all the power and depth of an aged añejo. It's a clear fluid. It's not blonde like some of them are. Here I go. Now, this is a fluid that explodes in the mouth in all directions on the palate, and the finish continues to give heat and warmth as it goes down. Strongly recommended, little known, but it is purchasable at Amazon and Walmart because they've just achieved some distribution. And now, because it's Passover, I wanted to give this extraordinary kosher wine, the Red Sea by Covenant Wines. This is a 2024 rosé wine. Now, I want to say this right now. I'm not a rosé kind of a guy. I don't like rosé, but this overpowered me with its muscular delivery of flavor and maturation. I first came across it with Ken Abramowitz and the vintner, Jeff Morgan, in a recent event at Boca. I've just opened this now. I have a second bottle, which I use for Pesach. Let's see what this bottle does. I've been chilling it all this time. While my rhetoric has been heated, the wine has been chilled. See, this rosé delivers in all directions. It's not a sweet rosé. It's actually only lightly colored as a rosé, so it isn't a pink rosé, but it is so filled with flavor and so delightful on the nose, and the finish is extraordinary. And even the palate is tremendously refreshing. And so I say, l'chaim to all our friends on Passover, get a covenant wine, hopefully a rosé, although there are many other selections. I'd like to salute Donald Trump for coming to the rescue. On my last show, I said that Donald Trump would take moves against anti-Semitism and hate on the campus, and it would take days, not weeks. And that's exactly what we've seen. We've seen expulsions. We've seen millions and billions of dollars withheld from universities. We've seen lawsuits. We've seen universities buckle. And so America has been saved from the calamity that people like Zalmi and Richard Heideman and Nat Lewin thought was coming. But now he must turn his attention to other countries where Jews are being persecuted as they were in former days. So, one more drink. Fabulous. So now I want to turn things over to our next vintage boy, and that's going to be Zalmi, the president of Likud UK. And speaking about Exodus, Zalmi, do I understand that the Jews are getting ready for an exodus from England, including you? And by the way, where the heck are you? Ashkelon or London?
I am currently in Ashkelon. What you see behind me is a picture of the Ashkelon coastline at night. I can see down the throat of Gaza. And most congregations say Tehillim, and they say a prayer for the hostages. But when you stand on the balcony of this, the 15th floor and overlooking Gaza, and you say that prayer, it means a lot more. And I've been here for about a week, and last Shabbat, I heard a lot of bombing going on. And then, of course, on Sunday, we heard that they had wiped out quite a lot of Hamas terrorists and rocket launchers. So, I have to say, our boys, our IDF, what they have done, south, north, east, and west, is just something phenomenal. And if we drink to anything tonight, okay, Trump notwithstanding, we drink to the wonderful boys and girls of the IDF who have literally changed the fortunes of the Middle East. They have turned a northern front, which was frighteningly genocidal, with 230,000 Hezbollah rockets directed by Iran, now completely decimated. We have literally destroyed Hamas down to about 10% of its power. They're working very hard in the West Bank. Syria is, well, it's just, Syria has been the most wonderful bonus ticket that we got out of this whole thing. And compared to where we were, and you mentioned this anti-Semitism on campus, and I remember about, what is it? Maybe it was Rosh Hashanah when we had our last Vintage Boys. I remember you, Edwin, you were close to tears when you saw what was going on campus. You really were. And yes, Trump has been a salvation and a deliverance. And we hope that he will have the strength and fortitude to roll back this axis of evil and give Israel the support that it needs, and give, frankly, the forces of good what they need to defeat the forces of evil. What I'm drinking tonight is, here in Ashkelon, is some Glendronach. I know you love to be able to roll that off of your lips because you've been in my house. And I know that if I say Glendronach, that's something that you love to say. And this is a sherry-based Highland Scotch, which is matured in sherry casks from Spain. And it's extremely tasty. I'm not going to give you all of the notes and flavors because only Josh London is able to describe Scotch the way it is. But I drink a l'chaim to you and all of your audience, and I salute. I do salute Richard on what he's doing to take the money out of these terrorist organizations. So l'chaim and Pesach Sameach.
L'chaim.
L'chaim toda.
L'chaim. Now, what's going on with the Jews of London? Are you guys getting out?
Well, I have to tell you, something, demonstrations in London led by the likes of Jeremy Corbyn and other Jew haters, that didn't move many Jews out of England. But what did was the stupid Labour Party Chancellor of the Exchequer, or the finance minister, as you would call it, she literally has raised taxes and raised inheritance tax thresholds to the extent that there has been a mass exodus of all Jewish wealth creators and also non-Jewish wealth creators from the country. We have literally had a not a brain drain, but a wealth drain by the 6th of April, which is the tax year. And many people literally arrived here in the last few days. Very, very wealthy Jews have just come here on Aliyah because they are leaving England. So England is in a death spiral, I would say. And when it comes to Trump's tariffs, it's even worse. So, and you know what? The nicest thing I heard today was Ireland. Ireland has been really, really badly hit by Trump's tariffs. And that is God's thank you note to the Irish for their support of Palestinian terrorism over the last 18 months.
All right. Tell me this, Zalmi. You're in Ashkelon, and how far are you from the beach?
10 paces.
And how long would it take you to drive to Gaza?
About 12 minutes.
And how long would it take you to drive to Tel Aviv?
I don't know about Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv, maybe like 50 minutes. Yerushalayim, maybe 1 hour. And I'll be in Yerushalayim for Pesach.
I will be there in a couple of weeks, but I'm sorry I'm going north. I'm not going south. I really wanted to go to Ashkelon, but we ended up going to Svad. And I want to thank you for an excellent resume. Now, just before I let you go, what are the Brits thinking of the way Trump is running the country?
I think that the Brits generally are going to be very resentful of Trump. He didn't get a very good reception when he came to England. When he came to London, the London mayor was against him. There were demonstrations against him. Who cares? The bottom line is that, you have our prime minister on his bended knees to Trump. Trump's entitled to charge reciprocal tariffs across the water. It's the way it is. It's going to be messy for about maybe, I don't know, a month or so. But the bottom line is Trump's doing right by the American people. He's doing right by the forces of good against evil. He's doing right against the deep state. He's doing right against so many things. We just have to give him support. And frankly, I hope the Secret Service detail is quadrupled, because the number of people who are out to remove him must be, my God, there must be a line of countries that want to just remove him. And that scares me.
All right. I want to thank you for your comments. I want to wish you and your beautiful family Chag Sameach Pesach. I won't be with you this year. I hope to be with you in another year. And now we're going to take it to our third vintage boy. Wait a minute, before I let you go, you didn't think I could pronounce that whiskey, but I'd like to remind you, I'm almost the only American who's been to Drummond-Drachet. There are even fewer people who can pronounce Drummond-Drachet. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Only you say it. It rolls off your tongue.
Okay, let's get to our next vintage boy. It's Ken Abramowitz from Palm Beach. So, Ken, I'd like to ask you a question. What the hell is going on with the stock market? And are we going under or are we flying high? I've got an opinion. I'll let you talk about it. I believe that there's been a huge imbalance in world trade. I'd like to know why people in Vermont can make excellent cheddar cheese and they tried to drive it across the street to Canada and they're charged 290% tariff. I'd like to know, and I'm sure that Shel, who lives in Detroit, I'd like to know why Canada makes it impossible for me to sell a book directly in Canada. Why Random House, when they had an international bestseller, IBM and the Holocaust, had to create a special publishing house called Random House Canada to publish IBM. So tell us what's going on and tell us what you're drinking and take the screen, Ken.
It's great to be with you as always. So let me say something about the stock market and tariffs, and then I'll say something about my covenant wine that I'm going to show off today. So first, relative to the stock market, President Trump telegraphed the tariffs are coming and that they're going to be roughly 25%. So there should have been no surprise. The stock market should have been flat today, but instead it was down around, depending on what index you're looking at, in round numbers down 4 or 5%. So the market acted as if it was a big shock. It's equivalent, reports say, to a $700 billion tax increase, one of the largest tax increases ever. And now bear in mind, imports are 15% of the GDP. So if you raise prices through tariffs 25% on 15% of the GDP, it's like 4 points to the inflation rate. So if nothing else changes, which it would. So the inflation rate could go from 3% to 7% temporarily. The GDP could decelerate from 2% to 0. And so the stock market was right to be concerned. And by the way, oil went down 6%, 7%, which is an offsetting benefit for inflation. So short term, yes, it is a mess. And hopefully the mess only lasts a few months. And now also bear in mind, everyone wants to increase manufacturing in America. You don't just build a factory months. So it takes months, depending upon what you're producing, of course. It takes months to produce these factories and hire the workers and the equipment and everything that's necessary. Now, if you go long term, by that I mean thinking out 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it's very positive for the economy. President Trump's already announced about $5 trillion of deals by various companies in anticipation of tariffs. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more than that. So America's going to become like a magnet for capital, a magnet for manufacturing, a magnet for workers. And so President Trump is right to be very excited. I think he wanted to take the pain fast, and so that the gain will come later on in his 4-year period of time. I said to myself, why don't you just raise tariffs 5% a year for 5 years? I think he decided, let's get it over with. It'll be a shock, and then everything will get better from here, and I'll be forgiven the next time there's an election. My guess is that's what he was thinking about. By the way, this is bad for our neighbors, Canada, Mexico, and the EU, but it's particularly bad for our enemies like China, and with oil prices going down, it's bad for Russia. So maybe that was in the back of his mind, that it's very good for America, very bad for China and Russia, and that's what they deserve. So that's my quick take on that. So let me take my remaining time and discuss my Cabernet from 2021 from Covenant. And by the way, I like rosés too, like Edwin had, but rosés are really for women. And so a real man has Cabernet. So that's why I brought the Cabernet here. And here's the Covenant bottle. And this is the Solomon Lot 70 from 2021. And on their website, they say it's our purest expression of Napa Valley grapes. It's 14th vintage of Solomon Lot 70, which is lush, supple textured, loaded with ripe black fruit and spice flavors. Dark black fruit is at the fore, and long-lasting layers of excellence. So it's a good choice. I'm glad I got it. And we have to support our friend Jeff, and he deserves to support this for two reasons. Covenant Wines, he's doing a great job with kosher American wines. And the other reason we have to support him is because of his time on the vintage place. Jeff has become normal in the past year or two, and now has a realistic understanding of good and evil. And so we all have to take credit for helping to make Jeff normal. So here's a l'chaim to everybody, and a happy Pesach to everybody.
I am. All right, Ken, a couple of things. First of all, Jeff is not with us today because he's actually out working with some new vineyards in California. But he authorized me to say a few words on his behalf. I don't know if these were the words he wanted me to say, but it's true. Jeff was insane. He was a rabid Democrat. He had Trump derangement syndrome, acutus. And finally, I think there was one anti-Israel measure too many, and he finally left the Democratic Party. And he wanted me to say that he is now cured. So we did have a wonderful meeting with you in Boca just a couple of weeks ago, and he was there. He regrets that he can't be here. Now let's talk about.
Does that mean he's canceled the New York Times subscription?
No, I think there's a limit to his rehabilitation, and it'll take longer for him to cancel the New York Times. However, and he's probably still listening to NPR, but he's slowly coming around to our way of thinking. And I want to salute him. And I want to salute us for being kind to him during his wandering in the desert of the Democratic Party, which is now finished. Ken, let's talk about the problem that Trump has got. And the problem that Trump has got is he's doing it simultaneously. He's putting these tariffs. He's getting these guys to open plants here. But you can't open plants in 5 days. You can't even open a plant in 5 weeks. So I think the disruption is going to be more than a month. I think it's going to be 6 months. But he's fixing the house. He's fixing the roof. He's fixing the doors. He's installing new windows because our country was on the verge of economic and democratic collapse until he came along. And by the way, let me also lift a glass for a great American, and that's Elon Musk. Thank you very much. L'chaim to Elon Musk. Sorry, Wes. Hold on here. All right, so what do you think is the real story? It's not a month. It's 6 months, isn't it?
Yes, but I think Trump realizes that we're in a multi-front war. Not that he read my book, but we just think similarly. And I think he thinks that he should take whatever pain he has to take and take it now. The election's obviously midterm, not till November of next year. He's got roughly 18 months. And so take the economic pain of these tariffs now, take the economic political pushback of going after the deep state now, take care of the Iran death cult now, and then I think he thinks if he takes this pain for the first 6 months, he'll have, no pun intended, a lot of gain in the subsequent year and then into the midterms and into the second 2 years of his term. And then, of course, the 4 years coming up thereafter in his third term.
Right. The third term isn't official yet. It's just being discussed. Is that correct?
He said he really hasn't looked into it.
I know. And I've got questions here about the third term and also the fourth term. That's a legitimate topic for us to discuss, correct?
Well, actually, Zalmi should be very excited if that happens, because then America will go from 50 to maybe 60 different states, and the UK will be one of them. And you'll have a normal country again in the UK.
It'll just be a stopping off place after Greenland, right?
And then France.
And then France. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, even though I was joking, we actually have to save England and France from a Muslim takeover because they have nuclear weapons. We can't sit back here in America and say we don't care.
It's not a Muslim takeover. It's an Islamist takeover. We have to always be careful to differentiate between our friends, the Muslims, and our not friends, the Islamists. Remember, one of Israel's closest allies, several of them, there's Azerbaijan, it's Muslim, there's India, one of the most populous of Muslim states. It's the Islamists who are giving us a problem. Thank you, Ken, and I hope to see you soon. And l'chaim to you and your beautiful wife, Nira. You should have a good Pesach. And now I want to take it to our third vintage boy, Shel Freilich, who is actually just across the street from Canada. So how's the burn there, Shel? What's going on and what do you know?
Well,
Wait a minute. Before we let Shel talk, he's the president of the ZOA Michigan, which is the best ZOA chapter in the United States. Take it, Shel.
thank you for the warm words, Edwin. And I'm going to be talking about Canada. And when France becomes one of the United States states, it'll be easy for President Trump to just attach it next to Quebec, which is already French. Since Canada will be the 51st state, they'll just attach France to Quebec, and it'll just be a seamless integration.
I agree. It would be a seamless transition. Go ahead.
Right. I'm not in Detroit today. Actually, I was in Virginia at my son's house for my grandson's bar mitzvah this last Shabbat, and we left Virginia, and we're now we traveled to South Carolina for a few days as a getaway, my wife and I. So I'm from the South, y'all, saying hello. In fact, we got up very early, jumped in the car this morning to make it to the bed and breakfast in time for the Edwin Black show. So we drove rather rapidly, but we got here. You wanted me to talk a little bit about Canada first and what's going on in Canada. Well, Canada's Jew hatred is incredible. If you look at what's gone on in the streets of the United States and on the campuses of the United States, it's on a mega level in Canada. November 2024, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly's 70th session was held in Montreal. Well, what happened? The Vest for Palestine rioters wreaked havoc on the city, on Montreal, ignited smoke bombs, threw metal barriers into the street, smashed windows of businesses and the convention center where the NATO delegates were meeting. Rioters torched cars, burned an effigy of Prime Minister Netanyahu, and called for a final solution of Jews. And the police only arrested 3 protesters. And the Canadian minister said this was a violent act of anarchy by a mob. And while Montreal burned, Prime Minister Trudeau was dancing and handing out friendship bracelets at a Taylor Swift concert in Toronto. And it took him 24 hours to weigh in with a single tweet. Since October 2023, across Canada, there's been drive-by shootings at Jewish schools, coordinated bomb threats targeting 100 Jewish institutions. One Toronto synagogue was vandalized 7 times in a year. Rocks thrown through windows. An elementary school was the target of 2 drive-by shootings. Jewish businesses across the country are routinely vandalized. Jews in their neighborhoods are besieged by pro-Palestinian protesters. Mothers are fearful of sending their children to their Jewish schools for fear of what's going to happen. Members of the largest Canadian synagogue in Toronto have to go through a guarded back door to enter the building. Yet parishioners at the nearby Timothy Eaton Church do not. They just walk into their unguarded church because nobody bothers them. Montreal is considered the most dangerous city for Jews in North America. The number of anti-Semitic incidents in Canada is the highest in the Western world. They grew 670% in 1 year. And DAEI in Canada only excludes Jews. And in addition to these verbal and physical assaults, Jew hatred has become normalized in Canada, and no other minority group faces these kind of challenges. When Trudeau and his Liberal Party came into power in 2015, Trudeau vowed to make Canada the first post-national state. That was his phrase. And Trudeau's government was determined to swell Canada's population with immigrants, temporary workers, and foreign students in order to boost the country's domestic product. Well, he brought in a huge population from these countries, yet Canada's GDP per capita growth rate is now, and has been for several years, 0.6%. It's ranking 3rd lowest among the 30 developed countries in the OECD. Meanwhile, Muslim advocacy organizations quickly rose to unprecedented influence. The Muslim Association of Canada received millions of dollars in anti-hate funding and derives guidance from the wellspring of Islamism, the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, the parent organization of Hamas. There's an estimated 1.8 million Muslims in Canada, 1 out of 20 Canadians now, twice as many as 20 years ago. And the majority of them hate Jews, and more than 40% of them support suicide bombings targeting Israeli citizens. And these toxic ideas have merged with critical theory leftism. So now in liberal circles in Canada, the new phrase is anti-Palestinian racism. What's anti-Palestinian racism? If you try to deny Palestinians their indigenous rights or say that the Nakba never happened, then you're accused of racism. So I'll give you an example. The Toronto District School Board has voted to incorporate anti-Palestinian racism within its overall anti-discrimination strategy. A government minister in Canada was forced out of her government position and was labeled a racist after explaining how Israel was brought into being by Jews who built a nation state from scratch. Why was she forced out just for saying that? Because her words contradicted Palestinian narratives, questioned the right of Palestinians to sovereignty in historic Palestine, and was construed as denying the Nakba. In other words, her words was anti-Palestinian racism, and she was forced out, and her career was obliterated. That's the situation in Canada today. You can't say anything that's will be determined to be anti-Palestinian.
All right, what are you drinking?
Okay, so I didn't bring the bottle. I just brought a little sample bottle with me. And I don't know if this picture will show up.
Yeah, it shows up good. It's old.
Good.
It's Old Scout, single barrel.
Exactly. And it's a single barrel rye whiskey. As you know, I've had rye whiskey to the show many times. This is 57% ABV, alcohol by volume. 109 proof. It's 4 years aged. And Smooth Ambler, which is based in West Virginia, this is part of their curated whiskies. And they select the barrels from an Indiana distillery, and they select wonderful barrels. And so I wanted to wish a l'chaim to all of us to have a good year, a good Passover coming up. Chag Pesach Sameach. Happy Pesach to everybody. Edwin and Zalmi says a l'chaim to the IDF soldiers, and also to the release of and safe release of all the rest of the hostages. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Chaim.
And just a couple of quick notes. 95% rye, 5% barley, very bold spice, notes of mint, dill, black tea, honey, baking spice, but most of all, a very, very strong rye after palate. I highly recommend this rye. Unfortunately, it's a curated bottle that you can't always get, but it's a wonderful rye.
Well, thank you, Shel. And I wanted to, before we move on, I just wanted to agree with your comments on Canada. I wanted to remind people that not only, remember, we all have good friends in Canada and very good people. And we've had on our show the series Canada Crumbling, and we cover this on a regular basis. Canada has a deep-rooted anti-Semitic legacy. We have to remember that when Jews were trying to escape from Hitler, the number and the slogan in Canada was "none is too many" for how many Jews to admit. We have to remember that Canada gave a great refuge and honored the Ukrainian Nazis from the Holocaust, from the 1940s, who took refuge in Canada. So your remarks are well taken. I want to wish you and your family a wonderful Passover. Thank you very much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get to our next vintage boy. And this is the guy who basically likes to put us to shame. We're all just regular people trying to express ourselves about the fluids that we like. Then along comes Josh London, who was formerly in Washington, now in London. And then Josh humiliates us with his expertise, his poetic descriptions. So, Josh, tell us what's on your mind briefly, and what are you drinking?
Well, you flatter me as always. It's a pleasure, as always, to be here. I'm honored. It's a privilege. It's good to be back with most of the vintage boys. Sorry, Jeff isn't here. So I thought before I get into the whiskey, I thought I would touch on civility and its apparent absence. You know, it's a much commented phenomenon. It gets worse all the time. Civility stems from citizenship and proper conduct within a given political community, right? Given our deep divisions, a breakdown in civility is inevitable, right? Especially among elites who shape national discourse while holding views that clash with that of most Americans on issues like gender. How that's a clash, it's beyond me, but gender, morality, rights, physical reality. The ruling class, and it was bipartisan before the Trump phenomenon, the ruling class professes to know a certain set of answers to all the great questions of society, and their answers are radically at odds with the beliefs and knowledge of a majority of Americans. To be sure, this doesn't mean that the ruling classes, their answers, it doesn't mean that the ruling class's theory isn't full of contradiction, right? That their approach isn't full of contradiction. And it doesn't mean that there aren't disputes amongst the elite. You know, the political coalition with citadels in Washington, Davos, New York, Hollywood, they argue, but the tendencies of the class and its ideology are real and identifiable. And when you lay them out to normal Americans, they think you made it up, right? It's hard to believe these people are as insane as they are, but they are. And so we really are at least two Americas with two citizenries, to profoundly different notions of reality and justice. And so at a certain level, civility is impossible, or at least very, very, very difficult. Everything now is like the old point counterpoint from back in the day. And if anything, it's more like the SNL version of it. So, if you can't agree on fundamentals, then you obviously won't defend each other's rights as a matter of civic duty. You can't truly be fellow citizens. And it certainly will find it difficult to maintain any form of civility. So the good news is that the most radical positions of our ruling class, rights, about knowledge, about biological sex, about human beings, about reality itself, it's still sincerely held really only by a vanguard, although they have the run of universities and as the expression goes, the applied science of the administrative state. And thank God, President Trump is eager to drain that swamp, and Doge seems to have made a pretty good strike. Elon Musk is a fantastic citizen of the United States and taking a wonderful swipe at it. And, God willing, they'll be successful. But, the true tenets of the ruling class are, to my mind at least, anti-nature and ultimately anti-rational. And so they are very defeatable. And hopefully we will defeat them. But the prime task of statesmanship today would be to expose, oppose, and roll back at every turn and every level of authority, local, state, national. Get rid of this deeply entrenched, irrational, radical, destructive ideology and the class that advances it. And that's why civility is at its low ebb and will remain so for the duration, I think, at least for the near term. But the work needs doing. The country needs saving. And so we should take up that task together, hopefully in relatively good cheer, and hopefully we'll have fun getting recruits along the way. Jeff, I think, is, coming a long way, and he may not quite agree with that, but clearly he's better now than he was before. So to put it all another way, it's a sick world we live in, and I'm just happy to be a part of it. So with that, I want to discuss my whiskey. This is actually one of my favorites. I've done this one many times before, and you can see that it's the bog standard classic Lafroig 10-year-old. As much as I love the cask strength version, this is actually the 40% ABV, the watered down one, so to speak, the standard one. You can find this anywhere in the world, and I love it. It's utterly fantastic. It's in turn soothing, stupendous, familiar, reliable, complex, deep, creamy, dreamy. It enraptures with its heady, nuanced mix of iodine, smoke, sea brine, sweet malt, with its oaky backdrop and whispers of vanilla, and its rounded, oily, subtle, and ever so slightly drying finish. The jam with a lot of medicinal fish oil, a lovely seaweedy presence. Keeps one grounded and alert. It's like a good-natured thump from an older brother, an old school chum. Not for old tastes, obviously, but this is seriously brilliant whiskey. And, you're going to toast either an ascendant America or the beginning of oblivion. This is the one for me. L'chaim.
I am. By the way, guys, did he or did he not humiliate us again with his poetic understanding of Lafroig? Zalmi.
Not my intent.
Were you humiliated?
I love Lafroig. I buy the Lafroig all the time for my weekday imbibements. And this time, I'm so happy that Josh didn't read it off the label. He clearly was reading it out of his head. And the iodine was just amazing. I mean, I don't know where he got that from, but it's great. And Josh, nobody does it better than you.
No, and Lafroig, I have a special relationship with Lafroig. It was one of my entry fluids into whiskey. I actually wrote a novel in which Lafroig 10 played a key role. At that time, it was just called Lafroig, wasn't 10 until they later expanded it to 12. And actually, Lafroig sent its master distiller over to the United States to accompany on a book tour. So
So I was passing through Heathrow the other day, and there was a bottle of 70 centiliters of Yamazaki 18, which everybody knows is the most expensive whiskey in the world.
how much was it?
It was 1,400 pounds sterling, right, for 70 centiliters. And I often ask myself, what is it that makes Yamazaki 18 so amazingly expensive and tasty? And it is a terrific taste. If you take the 18 and take the 12, it's like day and night. And I came to the conclusion that it must be the radioactivity from the Fukushima water that makes it taste so great.
Well, let me also say that Lafroig also has, we're personally prejudiced to quarter cask Lafroig. It's one
Yes.
of our quarter cask because what they have is because they put it in these quarter size casks, more flavor comes in. Josh, do you have one more quick statement before I wrap it up?
No, that's it. I find myself, per usual, in wide agreement with so much of what's been said here. And look, it's a long path ahead. I think we're in better stead than the United States has been in God knows how long. And the President Trump is a man with the wind at his back, and Godspeed. Hopefully, the path continues more or less on its course.
Now, I want to deviate slightly from our normal routine. I want to bring in a non-vintage boy, but a vintage expert who's got a wonderful collection in his home, a collection that I've seen. And I actually almost stole a bottle, but I planned to steal it on my second visit, but I didn't get back in time. So he moved and I never got to steal it. Richard, do you have a brief Pesach toast for one of your bourbons?
Well, if you haven't heard of it, this is a Kentucky straight bourbon from the Bourbon Rabbi. Now, the Bourbon Rabbi is Rabbi Litvin, whose father I knew as the Chabad rabbi in Louisville, Kentucky. This bourbon is made in Shelbyville, Kentucky. The quote that's on the tag, if you can see it, the quote that's on the tag is just wonderful. It says it's 115 proof, and then it says 115 equals chazak in Hebrew, which means be strong. And the words are, the numerological value of the Hebrew word chazak is 115. May we all be blessed with the strength we need, l'chaim. And I think it's appropriate in this glass given to me by Ron Dermer when he was the most outstanding ambassador of Israel for 7.5 years here in Washington. It says the Embassy of Israel. It's a toast, and I want to cover two things in 10 seconds. We're about to commemorate 80 years since then Supreme Allied Commander Dwight David Eisenhower led the liberation of the camps. The second thing, the people killed, maimed, destroyed, lives destroyed on and since October 7th is beyond comprehension. That we still have hostages, that presidents, prime ministers, foreign ministers of 42 countries had people killed, injured, or taken hostage, and they stayed largely quiet. I have to toast our hostages, and I have to toast the survivors, and I have to toast as we approach Pesach and pray that before Pesach comes in, may Hamas release them all. They all should be released. They deserve to be home. And for those that are no longer with us, they deserve to come home with dignity. To all of you for your good work, l'chaim todah.
Alavai, here's my little medallion. Bring them home. I just want to give Claire equal footing. Claire, take a moment. Claire, you're not an aficionado, but did you learn something, all this libation?
Well, on my desk right here, I've got a bottle of water. But I will tell you that over this past Thanksgiving, I got to spend a week with my daughter and her husband, who live in Tennessee. And one of the things we did on that trip was visit a local whiskey distillery, which was absolutely fascinating as the tour took us through the entire facility and wound up in a room where we all had little teeny tiny samples, little teeny tiny cups of different whiskeys that they produce there at that distillery. So that was the high point of my Thanksgiving.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have time for the questions, but most of them all asked me whether Trump will be running for a third or fourth term. So we'll have to answer that later on. We are out of time. Hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 2 minutes away. But first, I want to thank my very knowledgeable and Hamish guests. I mean, Ken Abramowitz in Palm Beach, Shel Freilich, normally in Detroit, Josh London, who's in London. Zalmi Unsdorfer has taken refuge in Ashkelon. And our two experts, jurist Richard Heideman in Washington and security pro Clare Lopez in Virginia. I also thank my talented international team, including Nick in London, Lance in Michigan, Eve in New Jersey, hi Eve, as well, and Wes out there in the Bay, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. I'll see everyone back here in 2 weeks at 3 p.m. Eastern, and we will be broadcasting from the March of the Living with the descendant of Ike Eisenhower. That'll be Merrill Eisenhower, the great-grandson, with Phyllis Heideman, with Richard Heideman. You want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show? Go to the edwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. You want to hear me in person? Watch my website for events. Consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the U.S. or any Amazon, Walmart, iTunes Books, Google's Books, Kobo, or Audible.com platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 235 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust and Banking on Baghdad. You want an autographed copy, hit edwinblack.com and click books. Get access to participate live in future shows at the edwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show in about a month, and prior episodes as well, by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show. Click the notification button like tens of thousands of others have. You will love them. We put new ones up each week, produced by a bold international crew. Follow me at Edwin Black Book on X as well as Facebook. And now for my closing word of wisdom. To those observing Passover, you learn to become victims. Now, can you learn to become victors? I am zooming out from our nation's capital. Bless all of you. Pray for all that is unfolding before our very eyes.